Hey, what's up, everybody? This is an open discussion with C3 Films. My name is Chris, and this is.
Cheryl.
And today we're talking about the show The Walking Dead by Robert Kirkman. So, we are going to be talking about spoilers potentially from season 1 through season 9. So, that's a lot of content to cover. If you are okay with it, then by all means, please stay and enjoy. We won't get too deep into the spoilers. It's the show's almost 10 years old. We can't cover everything, but we are going to be talking about general opinions, and there's a good chance we might say something that you didn't know. So please consider yourself warned, and we are going to go into this right away. But sounds to me that my business partner has something that she wants to say before we get started.
I don't really have something to say as opposed to.
Oh my gosh, Sheriff Cheryl. You made yourself a bed.
Can you really like see the thingy
Well, all right
there?
then.
Yep.
You know, see that's the thing. When I was watching this show, I was kind of surprised. I was just like, "Yo, this is it's kind of cool hearing the Southern accents come out again. I haven't heard that in a while." So when I hear them talking and shit, I was just like, "Oh my gosh, I cannot believe how much they talking like they from the South. They're doing a pretty good job. Andrew Lincoln is not even from the South. He's actually from the UK, and even though he's from the UK, you can't help but notice that he is really good at having a Southern accent. And the Southern accent I'm doing is not even the one that he does, but it's the Southern accent that I heard growing up in Atlanta, Georgia. If y'all don't know, I'm from the ATL. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, dirty South. And when you are from the dirty South, you hear people talk like this all the time, and you know how to listen and accept them saying the things that they say and how they say that they didn't do nothing. They didn't do nothing. They didn't want nothing. But that's just how it be sometimes. So you got to know how to talk. You got to know how to survive. So there we go. We got Cheryl Choi with the hat. She's a sheriff. And you got me, your trusted host, Chris. And I'm here and we going to do this. You ready, Cheryl?
Yeah, well, that was 2 minutes of our show. Shall we actually talk about it
Yeah.
now?
See, you didn't realize I had a surprise for you too. I already told myself I was gonna do that before we started.
I figured you are from Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, so.
Yeah, that's my home. That's my hometown. So it was cool watching this first season again. Well, first episode. Like because we watched it so for that we could have it fresh in our minds and we talked about it on the show. And it felt strangely homey to hear because not everybody in Georgia talks the way that they talk. They have a very specific Southern accent, but it's very well done where it's not as heavy as I was just playing it, but you can hear it on certain words at the end of like their sentences and stuff, and it stuck out for me, and it felt like home. So that was an authentic part of the show that I very much appreciated, and that's before we get into like the rest of it. But the one thing I want to say before we like really start breaking this down is that the way the show begins with the two of them talking in the car about nothing and then leading into them talking about his marriage with Lori, it almost felt like a short film moment. Which can be a compliment or a insult depending on how you look at it. But to me, it felt good. I liked that scene a lot. I liked how it played out, and I thought immediately when I watched it, oh my gosh, these are two really good actors. These are two really good actors. But what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, when I first watched it, I thought it was a little slow at the beginning. I didn't understand why they were even having that conversation. But when you like after um, watching the whole season, and then going back to it again, you kind of
Mm-hmm.
see like, yeah, they do have they are setting up these characters, but then you really start like it's kind of like a baseline because these characters evolve a lot over the next couple of seasons. It even next couple of episodes, they just are completely different people, and I guess that's sort of one of the points of the show itself is just the evolution of how society keeps us in check and how without governance people are very different or can be very different.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. Like, I mean, we already told you that we were gonna do spoilers, so we know that Shane becomes, a really bad person later. But it's really funny because, like, in that beginning, he's such a good person. He's a good friend. He's a good everything. He even throws the garbage away in a trash can before they go run off to the scene. And I think, obviously they showed that on purpose. They did that for,
That's the
it's
type of
really
person he
clear
is.
that they did that on purpose. They're like, Shane is a good guy, but, he doesn't end up being one.
I didn't even notice that trash thing, but you're right. There's an attention to detail of going out of their way to set these characters up for who they are now, so that when you see who they become, you can see just how far they've fallen, how much they can see how much they've fallen, and I really like that about the progression of the show as a whole. But with this first episode, the other thing I really liked is the fact that there's no real focus on the zombie moment that occurs. And in many ways, it's because, let's face it, the show is done on a budget. It's kind of cheap, but that limit kind of opens up these kind of creative ways that they can tell this story, and it gives ground, or it paves the road for the tone of the show for years to come. This kind of slow, methodical, very lightly paced show with these kind of quiet moments that lead to like building to something. And for me, it works more than it doesn't. In this particular episode, it works very well. In other episodes, like for instance some of the episodes in season 2, it can feel much more grating. But I like it here. I like it in this first episode.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it was super creative how they basically skipped the whole panic of the pandemic, or, the apocalypse happening. And he
Mm-hmm.
basically just wakes up into it. And not only does it give us a chance to, get a lot of imagery and have a lot of visual storytelling, but it gives us the chance as an audience to learn the rules of the world alongside him. So I think, the low budget thing was kind of like a blessing to challenge them, to give them a reason to tell us a story in a creative way.
Yeah, there's literally, I think, a whole 5 minutes without dialogue, which is a long time for anything, but especially a television show. Especially a television show. There's just a long time of us just following Rick and seeing the different clues as to what happens as he's trying to figure it out. Spotting a dead body. Oh, that's weird. Spotting the chained up door that's slowly moving. Dead inside. What's that mean? Walking outside. Corpses everywhere. I need to get home. Grabbing, like walking through the city and seeing like half dead, a person with half their torso missing, but still like alive apparently. It's it's great. Like Andrew Lincoln, I thought was a good actor later on in the show, but going back and watching this first episode, he really gets a lot of opportunity to act his butt off. Because even when he gets to his home, where he starts breaking down, and he has kind of this crazy moment of, "Am I actually here? Am I dreaming? Wake up!" Like not wanting to believe everything. And the camera just is on him. It's it blew me away watching it again. Like I might be like praising it more than it deserves, but to me it felt really good.
Yeah, I mean, even the first time I watched it, I definitely felt like it was one of the most amazing first episodes of a series I'd ever seen. It's like, it's so good. Like, it's so hard to top it. Because, from the acting and just, like I mentioned, the visual storytelling, that hospital scene, it's so scary, and it just says so much. They tell you so much without telling you. And be it there is some exposition that you get from Morgan later. Like, who cares? Like, I mean, it's kind of
It's
neat
got to
to
come
know.
at some point.
Yeah, and it's okay because we need to know that, and it's information that he needs to know as well. So it's not like it was done in a bad way. Maybe a little bit,
Mhm.
but it worked for me. And as a first episode, not really knowing much beyond it being a zombie show, just really good. Even the credits, the opening title sequence, I have always loved because that in itself is visual storytelling every
Yep.
season.
So I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I'm gonna say something very controversial. But The Walking Dead has one of the best television openings that's ever graced television screens. Facts. There's nothing like, yes, you have your Game of Thrones. That, Game of Thrones is also very memorable. Um, and but Walking Dead is in a league of its own. It's everything from how the opening is shot with the colors that they use to the music. Whoever came up with that score for the opening theme is a genius, because there's nothing else like it. And it's a good example of how in today's world you have a modern day theme that is instantly recognizable, where if you hear the Harry Potter theme, you know exactly what it goes to. You know what it's from. Same thing for Star Wars, same thing for Indiana Jones, same thing for Batman, Superman. If someone plays the Walking Dead theme out in the world somewhere, you immediately know what it is. And that is how you create something iconic. So, one of the best. Absolutely.
And I would even go as far as to say that the theme song is scarier than the show itself.
Oh my gosh, you're so right about that.
It's
It
chilling.
builds such dread in you.
It makes me so uncomfortable, but and sometimes I feel like I just need to skip it because it's giving me so much anxiety. But at the same time, I love watching the title sequence because just the imagery is so interesting, and like I said, it itself tells a story. So
Yep,
I enjoy
I
watching
never
it.
skip the opening as a rule. I never, and I always love to see how they're going to build into the opening, because you watch the show and it's very much like how this first episode begins. You see Rick walking, he sees a little girl, and it's all quiet. There's no music. Then he shoots the zombie girl, and you're sitting there lingering on her, and it doesn't just cut right in to the opening. It starts to play just a little bit, and then it kind of just builds up, but you're still looking at the show, you're still looking at one image within the story, and then as it's building up, then it cuts to the opening, and now we're here, and it's just like, because not that many shows do it like that. So a lot of shows just cut right into their opening, or they open with their opening and then they get into the show, or if they do go into the opening, then it's like a cut to black and then the opening starts. It doesn't fuse the opening into the actual show to actually kind of just take you seamlessly into it. And I'm praising it a lot because I love it a lot. But yes,
Yeah.
amazing.
I mean, it's basically part of the show. It's kind of like what we were talking about, Invincible. It's part of the show. It's
Yeah.
weaved right into it, so it's kind of hard to skip it. I mean, be it is like 30 seconds long. I guess you can skip it, but you can't skip the beginning. And once that music starts going, you're kind of like hooked. And like, how do you stop after except for just being uncomfortable and needing to.
Right. Do yourself a service and watch the opening every time. But yeah, there's a lot. So this first episode is a special. It's basically an hour and 5 minutes, and there's a lot that happens from having to see the world before the apocalypse to having to see Rick after it and him figuring everything out, then him with Morgan, then him traveling to Atlanta, to him getting to Atlanta, which I thought was pretty interesting that he gets to Atlanta in the same episode that he talks about going to Atlanta. I feel like in other television shows they might have like used an episode or two before he actually got there, but he gets there basically right away. Um, but leads to one of my first kind of criticisms, but I understand why it's done. But like, on the real, how are you just gonna walk into a city where the streets are literally empty, and then all of a sudden you turn around and there's a horde of zombies on every intersection? It don't work like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Visually, it's cool though.
the show is actually really bad about that, where the zombies appeared really doesn't make sense. Like it's kind of like a game. You could clear a house, but then like a zombie will spawn somewhere in there after you cleared it. So
Right?
kind of like that. But um like once you get past that, then it's just like whatever, because it's not really about the zombies, it's about the people. And I think that's one thing that people have to really realize about this show. It really is not about the zombies.
Yeah.
It's very much a show about the people in it. And yes, there are zombies in it, but they're more of a reason for things to happen to the characters and force them into making decisions.
Yeah, I would say I think I've heard like we talked about this before, or maybe I've heard it somewhere before, but like the zombies feel more like a force of nature in this world, like akin to like a tornado or a thunderstorm or a tidal wave. There's something that's just a part of the world that can affect the world that you live in, and albeit they affect it very greatly. But it's really like you said, it's about how the people, how that effect of the world changing affects the people themselves within it. And so I do feel though that as a viewer, while I don't mind watching the conflicts between people versus people within like a zombie infested world, I do feel that some of the most fun I've had watching the show is when they do have to contend with the zombies or figure out how to get by the zombies. Like I think it's in the next episode where they want to go get a truck to like save everybody and get them out, and they literally have to find a way to get a zombie into the place and then cover themselves with the guts and then walk in the guts, and then it starts raining. And that type of stuff, dealing with how to be smart in the zombie apocalypse, I find very entertaining. And I feel like in later seasons there was less of that and more about, you know, the people versus the governor, or the people versus the cannibals, or the people versus Negan, or the people versus the whisperers. And like that's fine, but I do like them having to deal with zombies too.
Yeah, and they do have moments. The zombies are sometimes used for stuff like that in the later seasons, but I think there's even a point in the show where they even say like the zombies are not a problem anymore. It's really just the people, and then it really evolves into, um, it really becomes less and less about the zombies, and they're just like an extra problem, but it's like the
Mm-hmm.
least of their worries kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. So first episode, we don't get to meet a whole ton of characters. We meet Shane, we meet Rick, we meet Morgan, but Morgan doesn't even come back in season one after that first episode. We don't see him again, I don't think, until season 3 or 4. But in the next episodes, where we get to meet kind of more of the main cast and get to actually know who they are, and these are the characters from the comics and stuff. So we get to meet Glenn, we get to meet Andrea. I forget how they pronounce her name in that
Yeah,
show.
she's not.
Um,
It's Andrea, and she's not in the first episode.
yeah, she's not in the first episode. It's in the next episode we get to meet the cast of the characters. And then yeah, we also get to meet. Now Daryl's not a comic book character. He's a character created for the show, and we don't get to meet him until episode 3. But the cast of characters that you end up meeting end up being a fun cast of characters, and a lot of these characters, spoiler alert, don't end up in future seasons. Um, but the ones that do survive or that kind of make it, it's very interesting. Rewatching the first 3 episodes and seeing Carol as this kind of meek, barely noticeable character, you would never think that that character was going to become such a presence as the show continues. And I think that's one of the coolest things that the show has done, because Carol really does play off like some no-name character that's going to end up dead.
Yeah, she's definitely one of my favorite characters. I'd have to say my all-time favorite character is Glenn. And I
Same.
was really upset when he ended up dying. And I almost was like, I don't want to watch this show anymore because you killed Glenn. I was so mad.
Yeah. And that's one of those kind of things where I understand they did it because it happened in the comic book, but I almost felt like I wish they would have adjusted it a little bit, because this is one of the things we were talking about, having characters that you can like get behind. When you do a show, I get that you want to, it's fine to try to like want to kill characters and things like that, but you are going to have, you can't just kill everyone because of the fact that you want people to care and you want people to rally behind characters, and they will rally behind characters. And when you start killing off a good amount of the characters that people rally behind, it makes it so that then it's like, well, why do I want to follow your show if Glenn's not there, if Rick's not there, if Andrea's not there, if Carl's not there, and these are all my favorite characters. Well, yeah, maybe I like Daryl, maybe I like Carol, but yeah, maybe I like Michonne, but yeah, and Maggie left too. So it's just one of those things of you gotta just be careful. There's no problem with killing people and like keeping and catching people off guard, but when you make iconic characters, just you got to be aware of who they're rallying behind, because it sometimes can be enough to make it so that people don't want to watch your show anymore because then they don't care. It's a good point.
Yeah, and I almost feel like the decisions that they make to, to off people, I don't see the reason behind it. And so I guess like maybe part of the reason for that is just to say like you never know who is gonna die. That anyone is game for dying in the show. Um, and so, I mean, that is kind of one of the reasons why I kind of like the show, because I really didn't know like anyone was up for grabs, except for Carl and Rick. Um, except for then Carl ended up dying, which also made me happy, but for a different reason, because I just don't like Carl's character. But, it's stuff like that. Like, the fact that Rick can't die is one of the reasons why I was like, well, anyone can die except for Rick, but then we don't care about Rick anymore.
Right.
Like, I think it's okay to kill characters if you have a good reason behind it. And
Agreed.
if you have other characters that have been made to be loved by the audience. And then, you can kill them too, as long as there are other characters that have been made to be loved by the audience. And that's something that I think they kind of lost sight of at some point during the show. So,
yes,
disappointed.
absolutely. Because it's twofold, right? They have to be able to be loved by the audience, but they also have to be able to carry the show. Because you do need a main character. You do need a main character. Like, even if you have an ensemble cast, there's always the main character. Even if you go back and watch Game of Thrones, which is an ensemble cast, the main characters are basically Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen. And the story is kind of based and built around their growth. Even if it doesn't appear like it at first, a true analysis of the story will show that these characters are actually the main characters of the story of Game of Thrones, which ends up proving to be the case by the end. So when you look at a show like Walking Dead, like you said, you can kill characters as long as there's other characters that can pick up the slack as far as that people still love, that attach them and endear them to the show. But also if those characters themselves are interesting enough to carry a story as well, because you don't want to have a Stranger Tides Jack Sparrow moment where you realize that, well, actually this character doesn't really work by himself, whereas the main character, he needs somebody else to play off of.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fine. I think you just have to be able to find that, and you can figure it out as you go, but it has to be established, and then you have to go with it, and then you also have to like consider how people are reacting to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the show has been going on for 11 years now, and so that's enough time for a lot of people to just jump ship, no matter what you're doing. But for me, when I heard that Andrew Lincoln, the guy that plays Rick, was leaving the show in season 9, that's when I stopped watching, because my connection to the show was Rick, Daryl, Carl, and Carol basically, and then other characters like Maggie and Michonne I like. But those characters were kind of like, those are the characters that I had seen since season 1, and so I was really invested in those characters surviving. and half of them aren't on the show right now. So, and while I like Daryl and Carol, they never felt like main characters to me. And I can appreciate their stories, but that doesn't mean I necessarily want to watch a show about them. So, and that comes down to personal preference. That's not going to be the case for everybody. Everybody, some other people love Daryl, and he's enough of a reason for them to watch the show, no matter who they kill, and that's fair. So, but then again, but then Daryl is now Rick, from what you were saying earlier. You can't, like, anyone can die except for Rick or Carl, and now Rick and Carl are gone. Anyone can die in the show except for Daryl and maybe Carol. I haven't watched the show enough to see, but definitely not Daryl. So yeah, it's strange how the show has kind of changed and developed, but I think one of the things to always remember is that your show needs a main character. Even if you want to kill a lot of people, there's got to be a main character that we can follow and get behind, whose story we're invested in.
So I'm gonna fight you a little bit on that part because Rick isn't dead, from what I know, and I'm up to season 9. From what I know, like, yes, he may have left the show, but he still comes back. Like, they don't focus on him for a little bit, but they never show him die, and so they make you think that he's dead, but then they show you that he's not, and then they put you in a position to wonder what happened to him, like where he's being taken, who took him. Like, there's a whole thing of, like, what happened, what's going on, but we don't get to know yet. So, it's good that they did that, because then they can focus on the other characters while like, that's happening, and then we can conclude the show by coming back to it, and then getting Rick back without Rick being in the main show, which I think is okay, because the other characters are still developing. And our main character, our hero, and even though he's not being the main character necessarily because he's not in the show, is still around. So the fact that he's not, like, if he was dead, then that'd be something else. But they kept his character alive, and I think that's the important thing for keeping the show alive and being able to continue it for a little while longer.
Okay, well, we'll see how they handle that then, because I guess I'd be curious about what his story is. Cause I watch a lot of anime where they do something similar, where they don't focus on, like, the main character per se, to let you kind of get to know the side characters a little bit. I mean, even Invincible did some things like that. But at the end of the day, we still came back to Invincible, and, like, the last episode is about him and his relationships. And so I wonder how they're going to handle that when it comes to Rick. If and when they do bring that character back, how do they bring that character back in a way that makes his story feel worth it and like a true progression from what we started with in episode 1? Especially considering that his motivations in episode 1 are to get to his family and save them, but now his family is dead, and that's really the reason why I felt like killing Carl was kind of a mistake. Like, I feel like you can kill Carl or Lori, but I don't think you can kill both when Rick's whole purpose is to be connected to that family. Because Judith, the daughter, doesn't have much of an emotional investment with us right now because she's been a baby for the majority of the show. So I'll patiently wait to see what they do when they bring Rick back, and then once we get to see how the story ends, then we can maybe come back and then have this conversation again on if we think that they pulled it off.
Yeah, definitely. It would be interesting to see how they end up concluding the show and bringing him back. They really did put a big question mark on what's going on with Rick. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they're gonna do there.
Yeah, especially because he's just such a good actor, and I think this show really made Andrew Lincoln like a household name. So I'm wearing the Comic-Con HQ shirt. This is from when I got to work at Comic-Con back in 2018, I believe. And at this Comic-Con is actually when I met or was in the vicinity. I was in the same room as Andrew Lincoln and Norman Reedus, the guy that plays Daryl. So I actually was in spitting distance of Rick and Daryl at this comic convention that I got to work at because we were working behind the scenes and they were behind the scenes, and they were both very chill people in real life, which is kind of cool.
I went to a Walking Dead convention, and let it be here on the record that I got a fist bump from Michael Rooker, the guy who plays Merle, and that's pretty dope. So.
Michael Rooker's such a fun individual that he plays like this racist and like this crazy jerk in most things that you see him in, but he couldn't be any nicer or like any more chill of a human being. And I think it's so funny when you have that dichotomy between people and the characters they play. That's awesome. Good for you.
Before we go, there's one thing I just wanted to say, which is that I really, really love the ending to the first episode where he's in the tank Glenn. And you just hear you hear Glenn's voice on the walkie, and he was like, "Hey, you, dumbass. Yeah, you in the tank." That is like one of the best cliffhangers to a pilot of a series that I had ever seen. That was one of the best scenes ever. And The Walking Dead definitely has its moments. There are definitely some particular episodes that you could really pick out from the entire series where they just do like a beautiful job. Like cinematography, acting, composition, everything about it is just like beautiful. Like they do some really artistic episodes along the years. So it's not an all bad show. They definitely have their moments.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I love that ending too, and I love the fact that right before that moment, Rick thinks he's done and literally saves his last bullet for himself, but then looks and immediately notices, oh, I can get away. I like that moment of just like, Carl, Lori, I'm sorry. Oh. Like I just thought that was really cool in the moment because it was like, yeah, you're dead. So yeah, I'm with you 100%. I love the show, and I love and I hate the show at times, but I'll be watching season 11 when it comes out. So then you and me will be talking about it. Maybe we'll do another show talking about the season finale, the series finale of The Walking Dead once it ends.
I look forward to it.
So, anyway, guys, that's gonna be us. That's gonna be it for us today. What did you guys think about The Walking Dead? Have you seen Are you up to date? Have you seen seasons 1 through 10? What are your favorite seasons? Did you kind of fall off the show because once they changed from Frank Darabont, or do you think that was better? Whatever you thought about it, comment below. Let us know. And while you're down there, if you give us a like, share, and subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and we will see you all next time.